Hi everyone, this is Tisch Aitken, and this is your weekly horoscope for the month of July. We are in the middle of July and there is so much at play. We are still in eclipse season and we've already had two eclipses, so that's enough in and of itself. But we're about to have a third and final eclipse in Capricorn. And Capricorn has been the dominating sign of the year because we began the year with this historical lineup of Capricorn so this entailed Saturn, which is the ruler of Capricorn, and it's the planet of karma and accountability and leadership and responsibility, and it rules time and it rules structures and it rules government and it rules economy, corporations and businesses, among many other things. But it definitely rules structures and it rules people that are in authority. And in our own lives, it definitely deals with karmic lessons. If anybody knows what a Saturn transit's like, it challenges you and it helps you, or it forces you in some way or another to learn through your limitations and through your restrictions to mature and to grow. And Saturn met up with Pluto, which is the planet of death and transformation and is the ruler of the sign of Scorpio. The two meet up in the sky approximately every 34 to 36 years. And the last time they met up was in the fall of 1982. They met up at 25 degrees of the cardinal air sign of Libra, and they met up in the summer of 1983 within a degree. It wasn't exact. So that's the last time the two planets met up. And in the sign of Capricorn, where Saturn is in its rulership, they have not met up for over 500 years. So this beginning of the year, we had Saturn and Pluto meeting up and there are certain degrees in astrology that correlate with the world axis. So 0 degrees of the cardinal signs are the points most are familiar with, and that's 0 degrees of Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn. But 22 degrees of the cardinal signs are also at the world point, and they hit the world at large, people on the world stage, and it hits each and every one of us. So that Saturn-Pluto conjunction, that collapsing of old structures, death and rebirth on a mass level. And, it's been a very difficult time without a question. But the fact that for the majority of the year, we've had so many planets, both in Capricorn and at various points, we had planets in Aries. Venus was transiting in Aries, which is a cardinal sign. Whenever we've had cardinal Mars, Capricorn triggering up this story, but at the very beginning of the year when Saturn and Pluto met up together, at that time Jupiter had just entered the sign of Capricorn and it's in its fall position, but it still expands whatever narrative it's working with. And in this case, the Capricorn tale of restructuring. And the south node of karma was close to Jupiter in the sky. On that date, it was only 2 days after the lunar eclipse, so there was just a very heightened energy already because eclipses do bring things to light. And the sun was in Capricorn, bringing light to the matter, and Mercury was at 23 degrees of Capricorn, translating and communicating that story for all of us. And again, we've all been working with restructuring and repair and loss in various ways and transformation and healing. And we also, I think it's important to recognize that we've got a brief view of Saturn in the sign of Aquarius, which happened from March 23rd, and then Saturn just re-entered the sign of Capricorn on July 1st. And it will be in Capricorn until December 17th. But this is a big deal for all of us because it's reinforcing all of these lessons that we've all been working with since the beginning of the year. If there's work you need to do to get things done, of course, we've been in Capricorn way, many of us have been in lockdown, or we've been challenged to, whether it's, teachers working with students through Zooms, people, conducting business meetings through Zoom, people that have lost their platforms for music or for the event industry, doing it in virtual ways. So many of us have morphed pretty easily and quickly, given the fact that there have been so many restrictions. And of course, been able to do that too. It's been a very, very tough time, but I do feel that Saturn in Aquarius, what I noticed is that it entered Aquarius on March 23rd, which was 4 days after the spring equinox. And I noticed that although we were technically in social distancing, how much people started to connect in a more meaningful way in terms of finding and forming groups about music or house plants or metaphysics or other ways that people connect and raise the vibration. And that to me really is what the objective is with Saturn in Aquarius when it does re-enter at the end of the year. And we got a brief glimpse of it, and it's very helpful for technological advancement, for help in medicine, for help definitely with help with pivoting our businesses to a much more virtual world. And that doesn't mean that every business is going to be virtual. There's some things that obviously we don't want to live in an inorganic life, but realistically, and I knew this even before, I had no idea. I don't think anybody had any idea of how this would all play out for all of us, but I knew that we'd be much more going towards a virtual world in terms of business, and technology will help us to make that transition. And in the interim, we're dealing with a lot of different issues of healing, of business, of what our values are. And I've noticed this for myself and my clients and many people, that many of these issues that we're dealing with in our own lives that existed prior to COVID and prior to all these things that happened this year, Saturn kind of will, if there's certain things, kind of like the judgment card in Tarot that you're not dealing with in your life, it's going to keep coming up. And Pluto transits are kind of like that too. If it's something is not for your best good, you'll have to purge it. It's toxic energy. You need to eliminate in order to transform and to transcend. And I'm a Scorpio, so I'm very familiar with that energy. And so it's as if the world and each and every one of us, whether or not you have planets close to 22 degrees of the cardinal signs. Now, if you do, or if you have angles close to that, and the cardinal signs again are Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn, you're going to really feel a restructuring, a death, and a rebirth. And I would give it between 20 and 24 degrees of the cardinal signs. Pluto will stop transiting at 22 degrees by the end of the year, but it moves about 2 degrees a year. And Saturn will exit Capricorn altogether at the end of the year. And Jupiter, which is the planet of higher learning, is going to be entering Aquarius on December 20th, and the two meet up on the winter solstice. And that's something we're all aspiring for, because that's where our resources, our intellect, it's community, it's helping people that are going to need assistance. Some of us are really going to be able to charge ahead and create a new business for ourselves. We're going to be able to be survivors. Others are not going to have the chance or the choice in the same way, whether it's financial restrictions in their business, health restrictions. So we're going to have to think more in the collective, I think, with this Aquarian age that's up ahead. So that's a very long-winded way of saying that we have a lot of work to do to get to that point. And that's where this summer comes in, because now Saturn's back in Capricorn, and it's making us all figure out where we need to structure our goals. Saturn rules time, so it doesn't matter that we want it done now. It's more about, are you in line with what you're meant to be doing? Are you working hard? Are you brushing up on your skills? That was the other thing that I think Saturn in Aquarius was great and will be great when it re-enters, is it really helped all of us to get access to education, because Uranus is the modern ruler of Aquarius, and that is the higher octave of Mercury. It's about enlightenment. It's about community, as I mentioned, but it's very much about learning and technological advancement. And I've got a lot of issues about social media on the personal front, but I think from a professional vantage and the way that we can help each other, the possibilities are infinite. And now that we've got all this cardinal energy in the sky, all the planets, well, Venus just stationed direct, but it's still in its shadow. We've got the lunar eclipse taking place on July 5th at 13 degrees of Capricorn. This is the final eclipse in Capricorn, and a lunar eclipse occurs when the Earth's shadow blocks the Earth's shadow blocks the sun's light, therefore reflecting off the moon, and under the moon casts a shadow on the Earth. Bear with me, please, because it is a lot of energy and many planets retrograde, including Mercury, and also with eclipse energy, it's a very frenzied time. Whether or not you're experiencing change specifically, you'll notice a lot of people around you. This is a very, very intense year, but even in my study of eclipses, a lot of big changes and endings and major moves happen during eclipse times, and you might want to see how that goes every 6 months. But I've been studying eclipses for years, and I find both lunar and solar eclipses bring in major life changes. And they wake us up to things. They make us see things in a whole other way that we've never seen before. And the lunar eclipse that occurs at 13 Capricorn, that sets off where Saturn was recently. So that gives us a perspective as well, because Saturn was transiting at 13. It reached 13 degrees of Capricorn on January 15th of last year. And then Saturn stationed direct in September of 2019. It got back to 13 degrees of Capricorn. That's where it actually stationed direct. So look back at the story in your life last fall, around September. That's when Saturn would have stationed direct exactly at where this eclipse is. And then it exited, it left that part of the sky as of the end of September. But that's what we are reframing. And Saturn is about structure, and it's about structuring your goals. We've got Jupiter and Pluto are now retrograding, as is Saturn. Every planet aside, well, Venus just went direct. Mars will retrograde in the fall. That's another big thing we want to look at. But, we have Mercury retrograde in the cardinal water sign of Cancer, which can bring very old memories from childhood. It's a very sensitive placement. Certainly that total solar eclipse on June 21st or June 20th, depending on where you are. That hit all of us, and that was a very emotional eclipse because the moon rules the sign of Cancer, and the moon was in its rulership. And to have a total solar or lunar eclipse, the nodes of the moon have to be within 9 degrees of the new moon or the full moon. And in this case, the north node, although it had just changed signs, it's now at 29 degrees of Gemini. The nodes of fate changed from Cancer, Capricorn to Gemini, Sagittarius on May 5th. But this, the North Node's going to be at this point for a little while longer, and it was just a degree off from this total solar eclipse in the world, at the world axis, hitting everybody in the moon, with the moon in its rulership. That is huge. We're going to feel that energy for a while. That brings incredible change. It brings things to light. And then you add the fact that transiting Mars has just entered Aries. That's a big deal for all of us. Mars is going to be in Aries until January 6th of next year. So the next 6 months, we've got Mars in Aries, in the sign it rules. It's very strong. It's very powerful. It's very effective in Aries. It really gives us energy and the wherewithal to get things done. It's also a cardinal sign, more cardinal energy. The thing is that we've already seen a lot of Mars type of energy because that first eclipse, that lunar eclipse in Sag, made an exact square to Mars, both at 15 mutable. Mars was at 15 degrees of Pisces for that eclipse. Now we're seeing Mars in Aries, where, in July, this month in particular, use it to get things done. See where it is in your chart. See how you figure the goals you want to accomplish, because we do have a lot of planets retrograde. I think in this year of so many limitations, you don't want to look at it so much as the planets, the outer planets retrograde. You're restructuring with Jupiter and Pluto and Saturn all retrograde in Capricorn. Um, Venus has gestation direct, so that's going to start to move ahead. And it's in the sign of Gemini, which is a mutable air sign full of possibilities and communicating and also learning. The North Node of Fate in Gemini, connecting to your local community, getting involved in taking classes, education, teaching and dispersing information. That's a big theme with the North Node in Gemini until January of 2022. But again, go back to this Saturn story where this last eclipse, the final eclipse in Capricorn, we will be dealing with all of these planets in Capricorn. Saturn and Jupiter will exit in December. Pluto will be there a few years later, a few years longer rather. But we're still dealing with this very cardinal energy around karma and taking accountability. And Mars is going to set off all this Capricorn later in the summer. So what you want to focus on right now, take charge. Even though Mercury's retrograde, Mercury retrogrades every 3 to 4 times a year. Venus was retrograde from May 13th until June 25th. Venus only retrogrades once every 18 months. So that's a bigger deal because it's also a personal planet. And at the time, it was out of bounds, even acting wackier. But it's not retrograde any longer. Mars will retrograde from September 9th until November 13th. That will cause delays. That'll be a lot more frustrating because Mars likes to go full charge ahead. And again, it's in its rulership. It does love being in Aries, but it makes people a lot more fiery and triggered and impatient. So you yourself may feel it. I may feel it. People we encounter will feel it. But it's excellent for channeling the energy to get things done. As we get more, so Mars, when it entered Aries on June 27th, set off that recent total solar eclipse. And that could give more information about what this eclipse is for all of us. And I think in the next few weeks, we'll still see, because that was the biggest eclipse of all these 3 eclipses. And now we're also figuring out what we were working on last year, even prior to all of these external situations we're all dealing with as a world. And also with Mars and Aries, as we get to August, it's going to make more challenging influences. So on August 11th, Mars is going to trigger the Saturn-Pluto conjunction. It's going to get as far as 22 degrees of Aries. So it's anytime a planet gets to 22 cardinal, it triggers that Saturn-Pluto conjunction, maybe giving us more of a story or more answers as to what we're all dealing with as a world, in the economy, in our health, all of this. Also pushing us to get things done with cardinal energy. And there's so many planets in Capricorn. You have no choice but to work hard at whatever it is. And existentially, it's been a time where even prior to this that you've been you've been unhappy in some area of your life. Again, it could be your personal life. It could be your professional life. Taking the steps now to really getting things going, in that way, because the fall will have more delays. And we know from the 9th of September to the 13th of November, Mars is retrograde. But August is going to get a lot more harried because Mars is also going to set off Pluto, I believe on August 14th. So we're going to feel it around that time. So we've got Mars, triggering off that Saturn-Pluto conjunction, then squaring Pluto in the sky. That's a very combative element and energy. And then as we get towards the end of August, Mars squares Saturn on the 24th. Mars is also squaring Jupiter towards, I think, in the beginning of August, around the 5th of August. So we want to, know that the Mars energy is going to get intensified. People are going to get more fiery, impulsive, and angry. The best way for you is to prepare for what you want to get accomplished, because cardinal signs are the signs that help us launch and catalyze things. And we need to be productive. We need to get things done now. And in terms of the factor, it is, people are going to get more emotional and reactive. That's realistic. All of us are going to feel that way. And even in this eclipse chart, I noticed for the lunar eclipse, I cast it for Washington, D.C. because I'm on the East Coast, and it has Aries rising, so Mars rules the lunar eclipse chart, and all the Capricorns at the top of the chart in the house of career and life goals and public objectives. So all of us restructuring our goals and getting things accomplished, because that's the Capricorn house in astrology. But Mars is at 4 degrees of Aries in this in the lunar eclipse chart, and that's exactly setting off where the partial solar eclipse was on December 26th of 2019. That was at 4 degrees of Capricorn. So Mars is triggering that story. And although the virus happened in November, prior to that, we were getting more information, bit by bit in December and in January in terms of the world knowing more about it. But in this eclipse, Mars triggers that point, so maybe more gets revealed. And also Mars is conjunct Chiron, the wounded healer, in the 12th house of spirituality. So this is a good time for all of us to take, practice good self-care and use this Jupiter-Pluto conjunction, which now at the time of the eclipse is at 23 degrees of Capricorn. They just met up in the sky again on June 30th at 24 degrees of Capricorn. And that also is setting off the Saturn-Pluto conjunction. But that's a very healing and transformative energy. And they meet up a third and final time on November 12th at 22 degrees of Capricorn. There again, setting off that Saturn-Pluto conjunction. So we have a big year ahead about restructuring our goals. Some things will pivot temporarily, some will pivot permanently. It's dealing and taking accountability in every way you can to work within the limits, work hard, focus on your goals. Mars in Aries is going to facilitate all of us to move ahead. We're going to get a drive and feel that much more, but it can make us feel angrier. But there are a lot of reasons, many reasons to feel angry and sad. But use this in a constructive manner, because it'll get much more intense in August and in the fall when Mars retrogrades too. So I wish you all a lot of luck. Thank you very much, and have a very good eclipse. And I will check in over the weekend. I hope to. All right. Thank you very much.